Day. If you're in the U.S., today's a day where we remember those that have fallen and died in war for us. So let's take a minute and really appreciate the fact of what we have and why we have it. And in our hearts, thank those that are no longer with us and for serving on our behalf. All right. So today, I think what we'll do in commemoration of Memorial Day is what we're going to talk about is some of the wars that have gone on in the US, including what's going on now, how they've affected the economy as a whole, how they've affected currencies as a whole, what the Fed has done, grown, become during these different times, and then how those wars affect us, the people, and in the short term and in the long term. So let's start off with one of the most obvious wars that my father-in-law was in and was wounded twice in the Japanese end, which is World War II. So World War II, let's talk about it. The U.S. got involved in 1941, of course, after the attack on Pearl Harbor. We then declared war on Japan, which obviously led to us being at war with Germany and Italy as well. And we got involved after our attack. And the interesting thing was we were going through a very difficult economic time already. So we had the crash of 29, and then with policy errors, let's just call it policy errors, the crash of 29 extended itself through 1933, and we were still very much well below the 29 levels in 1941 when we got involved with the war. So we got involved with the war, and what does a war do for a country back then? So wars were primarily, it was soldiers. They were tanks, missiles, bombs, bullets, airplanes, all the resources for human beings. That's, a lot of people, I don't know if you know this, but Hershey's chocolate effectively exists because of the contract they got with the U.S. government during World War II. So did a lot of the cigarette companies. And those contracts led those companies to become what they are now. So in the private sector, outside of the obvious, which is defense companies, which is probably more applicable to today than it was back then, although I don't know. I don't think there was much private kind of wartime activity or companies back then. There certainly are now. Everybody knows who Halliburton is at this point, and questions how that came to be, and certain wars we were involved in, and certain advice we got about those wars that we got involved in based on who owns Halliburton. And I believe most of you are well aware of that fact. So so back in World War II, it would really increase production. Okay, so it would increase production, and then when you increase production in a country that is that is based on production, you're still in the industrial era, right? So your exports, not that they don't play a role now, of course they do. The economies are just more complex now, so there's more that goes into it. But as we're pumping out all this stuff for these wartime efforts, because we're not just supporting the U.S., we're supporting all the allies as well, right? So we're pumping all this out. Naturally, that's going to have a at least mid to longer term positive effect on the U.S. Now, there was a couple of factors that even made World War II a much greater effect on the U.S. economy. And if someone asked me what the real driver was, I would say all the building, all the factory, all the output, all the production. Okay, that would help you for a few years. All right. Now, if you read, it's going to say mid to long term. So that's what I'm going to say. In my opinion, I think that that's probably a short term positive. I don't think there's any